If I told you that one of the most important parts of the Constitution was written by the Three Stooges, what would you say? Yeah. Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, we lead, and we inspire. And, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. The Three Stooges did not write the Constitution. The Constitution was written by the Founding Fathers, who were some very, very smart guys. Here's the issue, however, and this is huge, and this has been going on for as long as we've been around. It's dumb, it's stupid, it needs to be changed. And I am a voice in the wilderness screaming to have it changed. And fortunately, I'm not the only voice, but we need to get people together to say, let's make a change, what we need to do. Okay, here's the issue. We use something that's incredibly antiquated and dumb to elect the President of the United States. And the foundation of our government is, and forgive me for being politically incorrect here, one man, one vote. That is the basic foundation. We have screwed this up so badly, and what's important is to realize why we need to change. People treat the Constitution like the Ten Commandments. The Constitution was written by men. It did not come down from the deity, from Mount Sinai. It was written by men. And people look at the Constitution that way, and the problem is that the Founding Fathers understood that what was relevant to them in their time was not necessarily going to be relevant later on. So they put in a system where changes could be made in the Constitution. And one of the things that we don't realize is that just as today everything gets politicized, I mean, wearing a mask in a pandemic became a political statement. So when I say everything becomes politicized, I'm not joking. Well, the Constitution, the writing of the Constitution was an unbelievably huge, major undertaking that took a lot of time to do. And there were different factions at that time in the United States. You had the northern states, you had the southern states, you had slave states, you had free states, you had all sorts of different postures that needed to be catered to and compromised. And the Electoral College was just such a decision. It was a compromise. It was a compromise so that the southern states, the slave states, would be represented with a significant amount of power. That was the compromise. And the why and because of the Electoral College in our Constitution no longer exists. It absolutely no longer exists. At that time, and keep in mind, I mean, we're talking so many years ago. At that time, a slave in a slave state was registered as 3/5 of a human being. Do we even think like that today? I mean, come on. But 3/5 of a human being. So when you had a state that had slaves, then that state had higher representation. Let's go over exactly how the Electoral College works. I'm going to call upon my very close friend, my very smart and charismatic friend and outstanding writer, Peter J Kaplan, to help us with that. So let's understand a little bit about the Electoral College, and let's make a smart decision. The Founding Fathers recognized that they were not the deity and that they gave us the opportunity to make changes when it became necessary. This is one of those times. It's been one of those times for more than 200 years. Okay? History is not black and white. There's always negotiation. That's why the Electoral College exists as it does, and it needs to be changed. Let's discuss exactly what it is. Peter Kaplan wrote an article, The Electoral College, Time to Go? The United States Electoral College is the Constitution-mandated group of professional electors formed every 4 years for the sole purpose of electing the president and the vice president. The way it works is each state appoints electors according to the legislature, and it's equal in size to the congressional delegation. All right, so every state has 2 senators, and the number of representatives, people in the House of Representatives, is determined by the population of that particular state. So we talked about before, when they had slaves, that for every 300 slaves, for every 500 slaves, that would count as 300 citizens in that state. So when you had slaves, that gave more representatives. You see how the balance of power. This was negotiated. This was done at the end of very, very, very long sessions, and they wanted to get this thing done, and it was somewhat of an afterthought that people were, which is why it doesn't make sense today. The congressional delegation of a state is represented by the sum of its 2 senators plus all the representatives, and by law, federal office holders cannot be electors. Of the current 538 electors, you have to have an absolute majority of 270 or more, and that's what's required to elect the president and the vice president. Now, if no candidate achieves an absolute majority, a contingent election is held by the House of Representatives to elect the president, and by the Senate to elect the vice president. The number of electoral votes allotted to each state and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., is based on its congressional representation. Every jurisdiction is entitled, obviously, to at least 3, because you got to have at least 1 representative and 2 senators. In all jurisdictions, they use a winner-takes-all method to choose their electors, meaning that the candidate who wins in a state is awarded all of that state's electoral college votes, and that's true in every state except for Maine and Nebraska. There they choose 1 elector per district and 2 electors for the ticket with the highest statewide vote. Now, following the election, the electors vote for the presidential candidate guided by the winning popular vote across each state. Now, after Election Day on the first, now this is ridiculous, after Election Day on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, and this year that's December 14th, these electors assemble in their state capitals, they cast their ballots, and they officially select who the next president's going to be. The votes of the electors are then sent to Congress, where the Senate President, who's the Vice President of the United States, opens their certificates and counts the votes. This year, that takes place on January 6th. Well, it always supposed to take place on January 6th, unless that falls on a Sunday, and this year that's a Wednesday, so it's going to be January 6th. The Electoral College was created in 1787 by the framers of the Constitution. It was conceptualized as a compromise between members of Congress choosing a president and qualified citizens voting. All right, so did you want to have the people that you elected to Congress vote for president, or did you want to have the citizens vote? It was somewhat of a compromise. The Electoral College's bane of existence is one of the most unique and undemocratic elements of our entire government. It was originally included in the Constitution as a means to thwart direct democracy, a democratic bypass, if you will. It was also designed to protect the influence, as we mentioned earlier, of slave states. Now keep in mind, at that particular time, slave states, slaves were 3/5. They had a citizen, counted as 3/5 of a citizen. But after the Civil War, when the slaves were free, the people that were former slaves counted on a 1-to-1 basis. But they didn't have the right to vote. So in the South, they made it difficult for former slaves to vote. So it gave the South even more power. You follow what I'm saying? How unfair this is. Under the proviso which counted slaves as 3/5 of a person for purposes of congressional representation, Southern slave states achieved outsized influence in selecting the president. The antiquated system has endured the test of time, never mind the expansion of suffrage and the abolition of slavery. Nonetheless, the problems of electoral college extend far beyond just what we've spoken about. Using congressional delegations as the foundation of elector counts continues to ensure disproportionate voting power to those in smaller states. As an example, you live in Wyoming. If you're a citizen of Wyoming, you have nearly 4 times as much influence as a voter in California. Actually, the exact number is 3.6. How can that be when Wyoming has 3 electoral votes and California has 55? Take out your pencil, do the math. It's about the size of the state. Perhaps the biggest vice of the Electoral College is its inherent unfairness to voters in the bigger states. Wyoming's population in the last census was 564,000 people approximately. It gets 3 votes in the Electoral College based upon 2 senators and 1 congressman. California's 55 electoral votes, well, that seems like a whole bunch, but its population in the last census was more than 37 million people. And that means that the electoral votes per capita in California are much less than what they are in Wyoming. To put it another way, the 3 electors in Wyoming represent an average of 100 and approximately 88,000 residents each. So each electoral vote represents 188,000 people in Wyoming. In California, each vote represents 677,000 people. That's a disparity of 3.6 to 1. Additionally, under the Electoral College system, electoral outcomes can undermine the popular vote. Isn't the basic foundation of a democracy one man, one vote? Because 48 states in the District of Columbia employ the winner-take-all method, it's technically possible, though very unlikely, that a candidate can win the presidency with as little as around 23% of the national popular vote, if they do it right. The point is, the system is flawed, and it can and does fail. You know, there have been forecasted that the person that wins the popular vote is not going to be the president. We've seen that twice since the year 2000. The candidates who won the popular vote have lost in the Electoral College 2 times in the last 5 presidential elections. In 2000, just 537 votes. 537 votes in Florida in a Supreme Court decision of 5-4 kept Al Gore out of the White House, even though he received in excess of 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush. And in 2016, Donald Trump won the Electoral College by a wider margin than Bush did in 2000, despite receiving about 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. The national popular vote advocates are looking to the 2024 presidential election as the time to further promote and secure their platform. Gauging recent momentum, lawmakers across the country have opened their eyes to the possibility of reforming the outmoded and undemocratic electoral vote. William Petrocelli of the Huffington Post said, and I'm quoting here, "This has to change. Each resident of the United States should have the same voting power. The simplest way to achieve this is to abolish the electoral college and insist that everyone's vote stand on its own. That would constitute true electoral reform. You can call our current anachronistic system many things, but you can't call it a democracy." In a democracy, the election is awarded to the person who has the most votes. The basic bedrock of a democracy is the person that's voted to be the leader has the most votes. We're not set up that way. When this system was designed, it was designed as a compromise. All right, we're out of that. I mean, that was a couple of 100 years ago. Let's wake up, smell the coffee, let's do things right. One person, one vote. Let's elect the right person, because leadership is everything. Leadership is everything. And the most important leader of all, the President of the United States, should be elected by the majority of voters and not by a system that was evolved because it was negotiated to get the Constitution, a huge document, passed. The Constitution in and of itself is a tremendously great document, and the Founding Fathers understood that changes would need to be made over time, and they gave a provision for that. We need to take advantage of that so that we elect the correct person each and every time we go to the polls. Once again, big shout out to Peter J Kaplan for his article on the Electoral College and for his help with this particular video. And because we never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's get out there and take charge. I'm Eli's dad.